Back on MorningLine, Nick Barris here. Thanks for joining us, talking about what begins this afternoon, or probably a little bit before noon, the Senate trial of former President Trump on the impeachment. With us this morning, taking phone calls and talking about what we can expect is Professor John Weil over at MTSU. And Professor, we have David who waited through the break, so we'll take his call next. David, good morning. Hi, David.
Yes. I want to explain all these things. First of all, the FBI who probably has more incriminating evidence than anything. Two, if you're a pardon does not apply to impeachment. If you go back and read the Constitution as it was first applied, and go back and read the original. Mm-hmm. 3, if a private person stood on the podium and did what Trump did, you know what the guilty will be found on that very person.
That's an interesting point. You wonder, we saw the president, and there's rallies all the time in Washington, D.C. and gatherings. We saw the president before all this happened. He did speak to the crowd, which was expected that day. Had this been a rally involving some other organization or even the same group of people, but was being led by maybe one of the rally organizers and said verbatim all the things this president said, and then that happened, do you think that private individual perhaps would be incarcerated as we speak?
That's a great question. I think I mentioned earlier, there's a case in 1969 called Brandenburg versus Ohio, where a person spoke to a Klan rally and basically said, if something doesn't happen, revengeance might be taken. And there were some armed people there, but it sort of occurred out in the middle of nowhere. And nothing came of it, and the court decided that there was not a threat then of imminent lawless action. In this case, the fact that the president is speaking makes it much more, if I got up and said, let's go storm the Capitol, probably not too many people would pay attention. But when the president says it, it has actually much more weight than a private citizen, and probably has to be judged accordingly.
Okay, and that's interesting. So you make the case that, someone in a position of leadership can be held perhaps more culpable than a private individual who spurs something like this on, which you're right. People are going to, follow what someone says if you're a believer in them and you voted for them, and that's how it. Let's get back to what we can expect then in this trial. How long do we think it's going to take in the Senate, Professor? And, when do we think it'll conclude?
Well, the last trial, the first trial of Trump took about 3 weeks, but there were a considerable number of witnesses, and both sides in some ways have an interest in not bringing this out. Trump, obviously, because it's not going to help his persona, but the Democrats as well. Biden, I'm sure, is much more concerned right now about COVID and about the relief package and infrastructure and a lot of other issues. And probably would like to get this behind him. So I think the best guess is probably it'll go through the end of this week, maybe middle of next week. One of the attorneys is Jewish and does not want to participate sundown Friday to Saturday, but I think the latest on that is that he's going to let one of his partners participate during that time. So I think it'll be relatively expeditious as impeachments go, but it's going to suck a lot of time from the Senate where they could be doing other things.
Yeah, which is what an argument a lot of Americans have is, even if they support the idea of this, look, he's no longer in office. Let's get to work on what really counts now for this country. Let's go to Wesley. Wesley, good morning. Hi, Wesley.
Yes, I've got 2 things. I got one. I ain't a Trump supporter, but I think if you tell somebody to jump off a bridge and they have enough sense to do it, that's not your problem. Number 2, a stimulus check is like somebody giving a dog a bone, dragging you through the mud. I think it's just taxpayer money being wasted. And the rich people don't know how it is about being in a food bank. You can't tell me them people up there at that city can sit there and say, well, I've been to a food bank.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, that first comment he made there, could be a part of the argument. Now that's acknowledging that the president may indeed have told them to do something, which I don't know that his attorneys are going to say as much. But at what point is there some personal responsibility? We're not saying, by the way, a lot of the people that went there are being prosecuted, and now the question is, should the former president be held accountable as well? But is there something to be said? Look, if he says something and you do it, how's that his fault? Well, he is president, I guess. Yeah.
The typical analogy is lighting a match.
Mm-hmm.
If you light a match in front of combustibles and you drop it, you can say, well, it's not my fault, it's the match's fault, but you lit the match. So, it's certainly an argument that he can make. His argument, of course, is that he did not tell them to act violently. And there is a segment in his speech where he said to go peacefully. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of other times where he said you got to fight or even fight like hell. But, he says that's metaphorical. And it's certainly true that many politicians use language like that all the time without necessarily expecting hand-to-hand combat.
Gotcha. Let's go next. I think we've got Rowdy. Rowdy, good morning. Hi, Rowdy.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning. What's on your mind, sir?
Well, I'm watching y'all's show, and I got a comment about it. What's going on?
Okay.
And the guy that just called, he said that that you tell somebody to go out there and jump off a bridge, if they go do it, they ought to have more sense than that. But another thing that really gets me about this whole thing, this impeachment trial, it's not about politics. It's about hate. Pure hate towards Trump. Pelosi, Schumer, they hate him. Biden, they hate him. That's not right. The government, they need to do what they sent up there to do. They just got a pure hate for Trump.
Well, and I hear you talking. I'm sure there is no love lost there on either side, and I understand that.
Right.
But you do understand there was an insurrection on January 6th, and what this is about is whether or not the president is in some way culpable for it, and it may be found that they do not convict him. But that's what it's about, right?
Well, they shouldn't convict him.
You don't think he had anything to do with what happened?
He did, but all the Democrats are doing is wasting money. Pelosi's California was burning up out there. She was worried about impeaching Trump. All that virus out there, people were dying. She was worried about impeaching Trump. She ought to be worried about the people of California.
Okay, there's something to what he says there. He even acknowledges or said that, he's not saying the president had nothing to do with this. It sounds to me like maybe he's saying even if the president did, he's no longer president. He's gone. Let's just drop this whole thing. Because my question that is a good follow to that last caller, I think, is if you're right, in a couple of weeks this wraps up, and then they have the vote, and they don't have the 17 votes from the Republicans they're going to need to join the Democrats to actually convict him, then it's over and it's done. And does anything happen? And you're looking back and saying, what was that week and a half for?
The point that Rowdy makes here, yes, Democrats, many of them hate Trump, but we probably never had a hater in chief like Trump, unless maybe it was Andrew Jackson or Andrew Johnson. He's directly attacked the media. He's now directly attacking the people like Cheney in the House, who had believed her oath required that she vote for impeachment. And so there's enough hatred to go around on both sides. As a country, we are as divided as we have been probably since the U.S. Civil War. And, hopefully it won't come to something like that. But, I think it's possible to, this sounds crazy, but to respectfully impeach and convict someone. If your vote, you shouldn't be voting for popularity. You should be voting according to what do you think your oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States means. And if you think that means that if somebody incited an insurrection, they should no longer be permitted to be president, then that's how you ought to vote, or vice versa.
Gotcha. Point taken. And Rowdy, I hear what you're saying in terms of hate, though, and I get the sense that Rowdy probably is a Trump supporter, which is fine. And he sees a lot of hatred, maybe coming from the Democrats in this case. But, look, I'm just going to sit here as someone in the middle. And if he's implying that the Democrats have hate and this president did not spew hate, he's just blind. There's hate to go around on both sides, and there is zero love lost on either side. So you're not putting out on just one or the other. It's both, my friend. We're taking a break. We'll be back with more phone calls in our final segment right after this.